Hello everyone, and thank you for joining Verifi's webinar, Resolving the Customer Experience, presented by Greg Witten from Verifi and Liz Chaffin from Visa. The future of disputes is here, and sellers need to capitalize on the control they can regain by positioning themselves earlier in the dispute process, removing unnecessary disputes from the ecosystem and reducing resolution timeframes. Today, we're going to explore how to capitalize on controlling disputes and how that impacts the customer experience. We will hold a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Please add your questions to the module on the right of your screen. Over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Peter, and hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Greg Witten. I have spent the last 17 years working in the fintech space in a variety of capacities. Currently, I lead the merchant sales team at Verifi. I'm excited to be joined by my colleague from Visa, Liz Chaffin. Liz, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz, and I have been with Visa for 27 years. Much of that time has been spent working on evolving and improving the dispute resolution process.
So let's jump right in. Payments evolution has reached a climactic point, not only from the new and emerging technology perspective, but also from a consumer experience perspective. As we were preparing for this webinar, I was thinking back to when I first got into the payments business. The most common way of making a payment in the card-present environment was through a standalone terminal. The iPhone had yet to be invented, and if you were to ask someone about an app or an app store, they'd probably reply with, "What's an app?" And lastly, my go-to e-commerce site at the time was eBay. So as you can see, I've completely dated myself. And two, things have evolved a lot in the past 17 years. Liz, obviously we've seen some huge changes recently in the way the world transacts. In your world, what are you seeing with the rise in card-not-present technologies and alternate payment channels?
Thanks, Greg. We're definitely seeing changes on our side as well, and I'll have to date myself with your same history. But over the past 12 months, Visa has seen a significant growth of card-not-present transactions. They have risen by 20%, indicating to us that consumers are relying more on electronic means for payments and seeking convenience. In fact, retail goods saw an increase of card-not-present transactions of 46% year over year. Now, much of this growth came out of the need to shift how we did business because of COVID. But we do anticipate that this shift will remain at some level moving forward, as more consumers and businesses have adapted to doing business through online and digital channels, and they see the benefits of continuing.
But while this growth is great for the payments ecosystem, increased transactions, and specifically card-not-present transactions, do often bring new challenges, such as a rise in disputes. Visa has seen card-not-present disputes rise by 17% in the past 12 months. And of all card-not-present disputes, fraud makes up 75%. And lastly, a merchant is 60 times more likely to get a dispute on a card-not-present transaction versus a card-present transaction. If you've been in payments even for a short time, you know that card-not-present disputes were higher than card-present. But this stat was surprising. It is genuinely a concern for all stakeholders in the ecosystem that disputes are rising at a similar pace to transactions. Liz, as sales increase, disputes will always go up. How are we seeing the impact of disputes in the ecosystem?
Yes, Greg, we have seen card-not-present dispute volume increase, but it is still in line with transaction volume growth and a very small percentage of transactions overall. The great news is 99.9% of Visa transactions are successfully authorized, cleared, and settled. But we do understand the concern because when issues do arise, such as billing errors, unauthorized suspected fraud, or customer dissatisfaction related to timing or the quality of products and services, disputes are a powerful tool that provides trust that consumers can depend on. Not only can consumers depend on it, but that trust can help lead to more sales opportunities for sellers.
Liz, I agree that those opportunities exist, and I think we'll touch on that in a few slides. Largely, we're seeing dispute volume rise at a steady pace, but breaking it down by reason code, it is obvious that consumer disputes and fraud disputes are the leading causes and do see some seasonal fluctuations. For instance, physical goods sellers typically see a spike in disputes the first part of the year, right after the holidays. So Liz, what are you seeing from the network side as the shift in card-not-present transactions impacts the timing, category, and volume of disputes?
From a seasonality perspective, we do see a time period around and following Christmas where the dispute volumes will increase. And as you mentioned, Greg, fraud makes up 75% of the dispute volume, and the top fraud dispute reason code is related to card not present. This is where the cardholder or authorized user claims they did not participate in the transaction. And this remains the top dispute reason code regardless of seasonality. Card-not-present fraud claims are difficult for sellers to remedy. We understand that based on the nature of the transaction. But the use of compelling evidence does provide sellers a way to provide significant evidence that the cardholder or authorized user participated in the transaction if a remedy is not available for the fraud dispute. If the seller has provided valid, compelling evidence, the issuer is required to do a couple of things. Certify that the name and address supplied do not match the cardholder name and address for the shipped goods, or certify that if it has contacted the cardholder to review the compelling evidence and provide an explanation of why the cardholder continues to dispute the transaction. Compelling evidence is an important tool for sellers to use to help combat any card-not-present fraud.
So oftentimes consumers initiate a dispute as a means of recouping funds when something goes wrong in the transaction. Liz, do you think consumers know that the dispute mechanism is in place for their protection?
I do think in the U.S. many consumers are aware of their consumer protections that not only come from the card network, but also from federal regulations. Even though it is reported that 63% of cardholders do not contact the seller before a dispute, I do believe that the bad actors are the exception, not the norm. Sellers need to be sure that they are doing their part as well to ensure that there's customer-friendly ways to reach the seller. Having proper customer service mechanisms in place is really important to resolve customer issues. You need to ensure that you have proper terms and conditions and contact information at the customer's fingertips. If the information isn't easy to find online or there are long hold periods on the phone, the customer will get discouraged. If it's not easy, they will call their card issuer.
So what are the benefits to a seller having good tools, policies, and practices in place for their customers when it comes to disputes? What we've learned is the things that matter most are brand reputation, quicker resolution, inclusion, and trust. Brand reputation is one of the most important assets a seller possesses. Sellers and issuers work hard to protect their brands and build positive reputations in the market. By providing transaction transparency, a cardholder's brand affinity and loyalty can grow over time, therefore leading to future interactions and purchases from those customers. Additionally, resolving disputes quicker is another added benefit for sellers. Whether it is a cardholder requesting additional information about a transaction to understand what was purchased, or requesting a refund through pre-dispute solutions. In either scenario, the cardholder experienced a resolution to their query or request weeks earlier than they would have experienced in the traditional dispute process.
Inclusion may be supported through proactively providing digital receipt and enhanced transaction information at the card issuer call center to the cardholder to include them in the resolution process, rather than waiting until it's too late and a dispute is filed. It also enriches the digital experience by providing details at the inquiry stage, which may not be a dispute or a pre-dispute. In an increasingly digital world, sharing data is still questioned by consumers. Trust may be gained by linking purchase history information with transaction statements in a secure environment like the banking app, or a call center can give the cardholder an increased sense of safety when their bank, and they will feel the seller is doing all they can to ensure fraud is not introduced. First and foremost, data transparency directly with the cardholder through a digital channel provides a better customer experience in which the entire ecosystem can benefit from. Issuers and sellers will have fewer calls into their call center and reduce disputes as cardholders use the enriched data from the seller to self-serve and resolve needs for information or validate the transaction, which in turn reduces operational costs.
So the message we want to convey is that the future of dispute management is here. Introducing the post-purchase stage of dispute management gives sellers control over their operation and enhances the customer experience. Data transparency helps cardholders validate their transactions, while resolving pre-disputes means chargebacks never happen. This stage reduces the downstream pressure disputes put on the seller's operations and can improve revenue and customer experience. Sellers need to educate themselves in order to capitalize on technology that resolves the customer dispute experience. It is in this post-purchase stage that sellers can dramatically impact how sellers interact with their customers. Sellers can provide consumers improved visibility and reduce the resolution time frame. So Liz, one last question to you. What do we learn from our past, and what is Visa's commitment and plan for the coming years and decades regarding risk and specifically disputes?
Without going too deep, the ecosystem has learned over the past 20 plus years that the dispute process must evolve along with the payment innovation, as the process has become overly complicated and lengthy for resolution. Visa is committed to improving the dispute process to deliver a better customer experience with quick and easy resolution, fewer operational touch points, and cost savings for the ecosystem. In 2018, we started with the introduction of enhancements to the dispute process that have improved the average dispute resolution time frame by 53%. We moved from an average of 55 days to 26 days. Also, we're able to reduce operational drain by 30%, removing up to 2 additional touch points, taking less time and energy for issuers, acquirers, and sellers. But we do know there is still room for improvement. Visa remains committed to continuing to drive innovation in payments, making it easier for people to pay and to ensure trust and transparency with a suite of products that will help protect the transaction and provide the best cardholder experience. As payments evolve and new forms of payments grow in popularity, our goal is to enable sellers, issuers, and acquirers to support these methods from acceptance right through to the post-purchase experience.
As always, Liz, you're spot on. And the point that I'm glad you made is that there's still room for improvement. We're driven by the goal of ensuring that the payments infrastructure for disputes keeps up with the rapidly changing ecosystem so that we do not hamper innovation or evolution. Rather, we're looking to exceed customer expectations. We want the resolution of a dispute to be easy, transparent, and as automated as possible. And now it is. Verifi is committed to helping merchants evolve into the next stage of dispute management while still protecting their merchant brand reputation, solving disputes faster, allowing inclusion into the network, and upholding the trust factor. Here's how. What you're looking at on this graphic is a depiction of the traditional chargeback lifecycle. In summary, the issuer files a dispute, the card brand is notified, the acquirer is notified, and lastly, the merchant is notified and responsible for gathering compelling evidence to be passed back to the issuer. You can see that Verifi offers merchant solutions at different stages of the chargeback lifecycle process. Prevent and resolve operate in an area we call pre-dispute. So before dispute in flight officially becomes a dispute, And resolve and inform are solutions focused after the chargeback is official. So what do these solutions do, and why would merchants want to use them? Prevent is focused on real-time representment, meaning merchants can share compelling evidence data through Verifi and Visa's global issuer network in less than 1 second. The idea is that the connectivity and compelling evidence data transfer can help consumers who are confused about a transaction or don't recognize the transaction, therefore reducing the total number of disputes a merchant receives. Resolve is the next solution in the process. The problem that Resolve looks to solve is the lack of communication between the buyer and seller when disputes arise. If you recall, in the traditional dispute process, the merchant is the last one to know about a dispute. What exacerbates this problem even more is that 76% of the time, a cardholder will contact their issuer first to file a chargeback rather than contacting the merchant. So merchants oftentimes are never even given the opportunity to correct issues prior to getting the dispute, which is why Verifi is continually working to change this. What Resolve accomplishes is the proactive resolution of disputes. Merchants have the ability to make this choice by providing refunds before receiving disputes. In this case, disputes are resolved proactively, and the number of disputes are minimized. If neither Prevent or Resolve do the trick, or maybe it doesn't make sense for your business to refund, some merchants see more value in fighting disputes, allowing them to recover lost revenue. Verifi can help with our managed dispute service, meaning our team of chargeback specialists work for your business. This offering is very helpful for those merchants who just don't want to be in the chargeback business. They don't want to worry about staffing, training, or the seasonal increases in dispute volume. Verifi's award-winning solution and team can fill this gap. No need to worry about missing dispute deadlines or hiring staff to manage fluctuating dispute queues. Lastly, this brings me to Verifi's Inform solution. We see the most applicability for this solution when merchants are focused on making better decisions within their fraud modeling solutions. Inform is a direct data feed from Visa's fraud and dispute monitoring systems that can be used to make better decisions at the time of authorization, therefore keeping the bad actors who try to game the system and defraud merchants at bay. So I just threw a lot of information about those product descriptions. So let me kind of take a step back and give you some real-world examples, keeping in mind the 4 pillars we discussed earlier: brand recognition, quick resolution, inclusion, and trust. So Verifi is currently working with one of the world's largest e-commerce brands on our Order Insights product. This particular seller was keenly focused on maintaining an exceptional customer experience by providing enhanced transaction detail, but also protecting their business against the negative brand association that often comes from chargebacks and disputes. Prevent was the ideal solution for this merchant in the post-purchase environment. In keeping with the real-world example of a leading consumer brand partnering with Verifi to implement pre-dispute solutions, a large digital goods company continued to have astronomical number of disputes on a monthly basis. Before working with Verifi, the large number of disputes had a detrimental impact on their business. The seller wanted a solution that quickly resolved pre-disputes and solved all of the downstream effects of chargebacks. Resolve quickly reduced the number of unnecessary disputes they had to manage, reduced the costs associated with accepting these disputes, significantly improved the customer experience through reduced resolution timeframe, and allowed expedited refunds. By trusting Verifi and Visa to facilitate the inclusion and collaboration of all stakeholders, merchants, issuers, acquirers, processors, and cardholders, the ecosystem greatly benefits by avoiding the operational burdens and brand damage that disputes can cause. So we covered a lot in the last 20 minutes. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today and extend a special thanks to my co-host Liz. If you want to follow up directly with us after the conclusion of this webinar, please email us at info@verifi.com. We're going to open up the Q&A section, so Peter, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Greg and Liz, for your insight. Truly some great opportunities for the ecosystem to take advantage of technology and automation to improve operations and the customer experience. We're going to open our Q&A section now. Please continue to send through your questions and we'll get to them. We already have a few questions sent through, so let's just jump straight in. Liz, our first question. Since the RDR launch, how has issuer coverage grown?
Thanks, Peter. So in April of this year, with our business enhancement release, we did an auto activation of all global issuers. Issuers did have an option to opt out, but it was an automatic opt-in. So we are now at, since that April activation, an estimated 60% of issuer volume is participating globally. In October of 2021, so October coming up with our business release, we have issued a mandate for all issuers to participate globally in RDR. So we will see full participation after October 2021.
Great, Liz. Thank you. Greg, our next question is for you. With increased card usage and lower cash usage fueled by the pandemic, is there a concern for an increase in fraud?
Thanks, Peter. I think the short answer is yes, but we're kind of looking into the crystal ball when we think about that. But the reason why we think that the answer is yes is that we've seen this shift of transactions from card-present businesses to card-not-present, so from in-store to e-commerce as an example. The pandemic has kind of fueled that shift, and we really don't see any, much slowdown from that continuing. So anytime you continue to see an increase in these card-not-present transactions, fraud and chargebacks will definitely continue to rise.
Thanks, Greg. I'm going to keep you under the spotlight here. Our next one's also for you.
Okay.
1 second resolution sounds great, but can you talk us through how that's achieved, please?
Yeah. The short answer is very carefully, Peter. But no, the actual answer is you have to kind of take a step back to when Verifi and Visa kind of came together. One of the, leading kind of goals for us was to make sure that we rationalize Verifi and Visa in a way that could allow the solutions to scale at a global level. And so a lot of the solutions that Verifi has launched recently with Order Insights, RDR, are actually built on top of Visa's dispute management platform, allowing them to scale out very quickly, not only in North America, but in every region of the world. So with that sort of architecture, that allows for that scale and these quick response times.
Thanks, Greg. Liz, our next question came through, and I think it's best suited for you. You mentioned earlier that RDR issuer coverage has grown, but what about Order Insight? And further to that, does Visa and Verifi envisage RDR being the solution that merchants globally will use for resolution in the near-term future?
Yes. So usage of Order Insight is also growing with issuers two ways. One within the issuer center, so like they're within either their dispute centers or their call centers. And we're also beginning to see expansion through issuer digital channel implementation. So this would be direct to the cardholder through their issuer's mobile banking or on mobile or online banking. And we do expect to see some significant growth in this area over the next 2 to 3 years as we expand those implementations. As far as RDR being expanded, same thing. After the issuer mandate in October, we do expect that RDR will also take off in the next 2 to 3 years as the premier pre-dispute solution.
Thanks, Liz. And I'm also going to keep you in the hot seat here. The next one is about reason codes for disputes. And in the webinar, we had the reason code dispute chart. How do you see these volumes comparing to prior years? And do you think that this is an elevation due to COVID?
Yeah, so the best way to gauge is to really look at the dispute to sales ratio. Since, as we mentioned in the presentation, disputes will grow with volume growth. So really looking at the ratio to sales is the best way to gauge on if disputes are growing in line or outside of the sales growth. In 2019, the dispute rate in the U.S. was about 6 basis points. It did increase in the calendar year of 20 to 8 basis points. Definitely correlates to COVID. We did have some large impacts related to disputes in certain segments, especially travel and entertainment, due to closures that were happening across the world. But we also saw other behaviors that we mentioned in the presentation, such as a shift, right, in card-not-present business. And card-not-present business, because of the nature of that business, does allow for increased disputes. So far, we are seeing a downward trend for 21. We're trending at about 7 basis points. So we'll see where it goes from there, but it looks like it is trending down.
Thank you, Liz. Greg, a question here about the branding of our services. So obviously, the market is very familiar with Order Insight and CDRN, and we now have solutions such as Prevent, Resolve, Recover, and Inform. One of our attendees is asking, where does CDRN fit into those solutions?
Yeah, that's a good question, Peter. So CDRN, or Cardholder Dispute Resolution Network, falls under the Resolve tenant that we classify. And just for context, there are two networks of pre-dispute solutions underneath that Resolve umbrella. So CDRN is one of those. It's been in market, I think, now for 14 years. A lot of people are familiar with what it does, but it really allows a merchant participating in that network to respond to chargebacks in flight within 72 hours with a refund or to not refund. Additionally, as we mentioned earlier, we launched a separate network, which is Visa specific, in December. So real quick, CDRN is card brand agnostic. So you're going to receive, if you're a merchant participating in that network, you're going to receive notifications from Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express. RDR, which launched in December, I think of as kind of like CDRN 2.0. It allows a larger network of Visa issuers to participate, as well as it allows some automated decisioning functionality whereby you can make decisions in real time based on the rule sets that you can provide. So there's not this manual review process that CDRN, if you're a user of CDRN, you have to kind of review each case as it comes in. This is a way to completely automate it. So we're seeing some benefits there in quicker resolution time across the networks, but also it's less of kind of an operational drag for customers who are using that particular solution.
Thanks, Greg. One other question that has come in is just with regard to the dispute ratio. So based on the snake slide that you had up, at what point in that flow does a chargeback usually hit the ratio?
So the ratio is only impacted when it becomes a network dispute, a network chargeback. So anything within the pre-dispute realm, so anything through Order Insight, RDR, or CDRN, is outside of the network traditional chargeback flow, so would not hit the ratio.
Thanks, Liz. We're seeing some questions just around friendly fraud. And what I think what we could do is maybe combine them into discussing how Verifi helps merchants combat friendly fraud. So Greg or Liz, I'll throw that one out to you.
Yes, I can talk through, I guess, how we combat it, and Liz, feel free to jump in if you have any other thoughts from the network side on the friendly fraud issue. So, one of the, so when you look across the stack of verifying how we look at certain things, some of our solutions definitely address this friendly fraud aspect of things. I think it really just comes down to the individual organization's goal when it comes to disputes in general and specifically friendly fraud. So Order Insights, which is under our Prevent umbrella, specifically is successful around that friendly fraud category. So if you think about friendly fraud as kind of a spectrum, when on one end of it, it's kind of the innocent, just customer confusion, I don't recognize this transaction. By using the solutions, we're actually able to prevent a dispute from actually coming into the system. Kind of on the other side of that are the bad actors who are trying to take advantage and game the system. And so in that scenario, the data that we provide, we want to try to create a digital fingerprint of the consumer that allows issuers to be able to ask questions and use that data in a way to make sure that people aren't taking advantage of the goodwill and of the dispute process that's built there for a reason, as we've discussed. As far as fighting friendly fraud chargebacks on Resolve, our Recover solution, we do see success. So we do across Visa and MasterCard, actually all card brands. When the fraud category comes in, our team is equipped and adept at fighting those disputes, and we have some pretty good win rates when it comes to doing those representments on behalf of our customers. So if we wanted to get, if you wanted more information on that, hit us at info@verifi.com, and we can go through some of the specifics if there are additional questions about friendly fraud. Liz, do you have anything to add from the network side?
Really, just from the network side, we're going to be leveraging our solutions with Verifi, right, from a friendly fraud perspective. And you might start to hear first-party misuse as the term that the network is using to define that type of fraud. It is something we're actively working on across the company. Obviously, it hits our risk teams as well, and we do have some working groups going on with sellers and issuers to identify some proactive solutions that we can put in place to help combat, and those will include Verifi solutions. So you'll hear more about that coming. It will be, more or less a phased approach and built upon over time as we can find evidence that we can all agree upon to shift liability, right? That's always the hard part. But more to come.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Greg. Greg, you just mentioned about reaching out with specific questions, and we're seeing a number of questions, very specific questions about friendly fraud in the chat. So just to let everybody on the line know, we will reach out, and Greg, Liz, will make sure that these specific questions get over to you. Liz, very quickly to you now. You mentioned that the October 2021 global mandate was for ORDR. Will Order Insight have a similar mandate?
We at this time, I will say, we're not planning any mandate for Order Insights. It's certainly a valuable tool to be used by both sides of the equation, and we're going to continue to encourage that. So I'll never say never, but as of right now, we do not have that in plan.
Thanks, Liz. At this time, we'll just wait a minute to see if there's any other questions that come through. We will be providing a recording of the webinar to everybody who attended in the next couple of days. And it will be made available on verifi.com also, so that you can share with your colleagues or your network to watch after today's presentation. At this time, I don't see any other questions come through. I'd just like to thank everybody for attending. We find these webinars are a great way to reach out to folks in market and to answer your questions. Thank you to Liz and Greg for your time today. We really appreciate the insight that you bring to these types of forums. As Greg mentioned, we're always here to help. And if you have any further questions, do reach out to either Greg or Liz directly if you have their info, or email info@verifi.com. Thank you everybody for your time today, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.